The air inside the relic moon screamed, torn apart by the high-pitched whine of Sol Dominion plasma rifles. Superheated ozone smelled like burnt copper and bad decisions. Jackson's veins slid across the polished obsidian floor, the friction burning through his knee pads, sparks cascading like a welding torch. He slammed his back against the ancient altar, breathless, clutching a modified industrial dispenser to his chest. Beside him, Lara breathed in ragged, wet gasps. Her armor was shattered, exposing skin that shimmered with bioluminescent stress patterns. She looked at him, her eyes burning with a terrifying alien intensity, the gaze of an apex predator, cornered, but not broken. "They are flanking," Lyra hissed, her voice vibrating in Jackson's chest. "Let 'em comes," Jackson gritted out, checking the pressure gauge on his tool. "Hey, Kane, I'm not done redecorating." A plasma bolt slagged the stone inches from his head. This wasn't the heroic science fiction story the vids promised. This was messy, loud, and terrifying. But as Lyra's hand brushed his arm, a jolt of pure electricity, arcane and absolute, surged through his nervous system. It wasn't just adrenaline. It was a connection. She was the weapon. He was the safety switch. 12 hours earlier, Jackson had been worrying about his salvage quota. The obsidian wastes were a graveyard of stars, a place where jagged crystal structures pierced the sky, refracting the light of a dying sun into blinding prisms. It was beautiful in a sharp, violent way. Jackson wasn't a soldier. He was a glorified janitor for the Galactic Council, scraping valuable isotopes off derelict hulls. He was the embodiment of humanity in the deep dark, stubborn, adaptable, and usually underpaid. He had been cutting through a debris field when he saw the flash of Sol Dominion dropships. They weren't supposed to be in the demilitarized zone. Curiosity, that fatal flaw of the Terran spirit, pulled him closer. Through his scope, he saw the setup. A squad of Dominion elites stood in a circle, their weapons trained on a kneeling figure. It was an Aethelgard warrior, one of the so-called Space Orcs. She was massive, regal, and beaten. "Target secured," a Dominion voice crackled over the intercepted frequency. "Execute her. We frame the separatists. Command wants a reason to invade." It was a textbook false flag operation. They were manufacturing a crisis to justify a slaughter. Jackson knew the smart play: walk away. He was a soft-skinned death worlder with no combat training. But ethical autonomy kicked in, the stubborn refusal to let the big guys rewrite the truth. The government wanted a war. The janitor decided to give them a scandal instead. He didn't have a rifle. He had physics. Jackson adjusted the aperture on his industrial foam dispenser, designed to seal hull breaches in a vacuum, and sprinted toward the cliff edge. This was asymmetric warfare at its finest, human ingenuity versus military discipline. He leaped, firing a canister of gravity-trap mines into the center of the squad. They didn't explode. They imploded, yanking the soldiers off their feet in a sudden crush of distorted physics. In the chaos, Jackson hit the ground rolling, sliding between the confused troopers. He reached the alien warrior. Up close, Lyra was terrifying, a monument of muscle and scars. He grabbed her arm to haul her up, and the world tilted. A shockwave, invisible but heavy, blasted outward from their touch. The sci-fi vids called it a soul bond. Jackson just called it a heart attack. The energy nodes on her armor flared to life, syncing with his heartbeat. He had meant to save her life, but he had accidentally wired himself into her soul. "Run now, ask questions later," Jackson yelled, firing a stream of rapid hardening industrial foam into the face of the nearest soldier. The soldier screamed as the gray sludge solidified instantly, jamming his helmet and weapon. "You are small," Lyra rumbled, stumbling to her feet, her movements syncing perfectly with his. "And you're heavy. Move!" They scrambled toward the ancient ruins of the relic moon. the Dominion squad recovering and giving chase. So Jackson looked back, seeing the tracers light up the crystal landscape. He had started a war to stop one. Now the only way out was through. The door to the inner sanctum buckled. White-hot metal sprayed inward, sizzling against the polished floor. 3 seconds! Jackson yelled over the roar of cutting lasers. He wasn't looking at the door. He was looking at Lyra. She stood at the room's center, her hands pressed against the vibrating obsidian pillar. Her eyes were rolled back, glowing with the same violet hue as the ley lines igniting beneath their feet. The air tasted of ozone and ancient power. The bond between them surged again, a phantom heat tracing down Jackson's spine. It wasn't fear anymore. It was a feedback loop. Her rage was his fuel. "It is resistant," Lyra growled, her voice layering over itself. "Tick-tock." "Hit princess," Jackson muttered. He dropped the empty foam canister and ripped the interface panel off his wrist comp. He wasn't a soldier, but he was a scavenger. He knew how to hotwire anything, including a Sol Dominion wideband transmitter. The blast door exploded inward. Debris strafed the room. Jackson didn't dive for cover. Instead, he stood his ground, directly in front of Lyra, shielding her trance with nothing but his body and a hacked comms unit. He was the safety switch, holding back the inevitable detonation of violence. The Dominion commander stepped through the smoke, rifle raised. "It ends here, traitor." "You're right," Jackson smiled, blood coating his teeth. "But not for me." He jammed his thumb onto the transmit key. High above the moon, the hidden Dominion fleet received a ping. So did the Galactic Council emergency relay. So did every independent newsboy in the sector. Jackson wasn't firing a weapon. He was streaming the raw, unedited sensor data of the ambush, the coordinates, the execution order, the manufactured evidence. "Smile," Jackson shouted over the rising hum of the room. "The whole galaxy is watching." The commander faltered, his comms exploding with panic from the fleet above. In that hesitation, the universe shifted. Lyra screamed, a sound of pure sonic triumph. The pillar beneath her hands turned blinding white. The relic moon didn't just wake up. It roared. A pulse of kinetic energy, ancient and absolute, shock-waved outward. It passed harmlessly through Jackson and Lyra, but hit the Dominion tech like a sledgehammer. Rifles sparked and died. The lights on the dropships outside winked out. In orbit, the massive destroyers drifted, their reactors scrammed by the interference. It was the ultimate checkmate. The apex predator had flipped the board. Lyra collapsed forward. Jackson caught her, the impact knocking the wind out of him. They slid to the floor together, a tangle of limbs and adrenaline. The quiet that followed wasn't heavy. It was electric. She looked up at him, the bioluminescence on her skin fading to a warm pulse. "You fought with math, physics, and bad publicity," Jackson panted, brushing a shard of glass from her pauldron. "Humanity's best weapons." The retreat was humiliating. The Dominion withdrew under the watchful censors of a council peacekeeping fleet. Their false flag operation exposed as a desperate grab for power. The political fallout would last for decades. But Jackson didn't care about the politics. He stood on the bridge of the Aethelgard flagship, feeling decidedly underdressed in his scavenger jumpsuit. The High Matriarch looked down at him, her 4 eyes assessing the small, soft creature who had saved their scion. Lyra stood beside him. She didn't look like a rescued victim. She looked like a partner. She placed a heavy, clawed hand on his shoulder, not to crush, but to claim. The bond hummed, warm and permanent. "Jackson Vane," the matriarch intoned. "You have no clan. You have no bloodline." "I have a caulking gun," Jackson offered. Lyra made a sound that might have been a laugh. "He has the spirit of a death worlder," she corrected, "and he is mine." The surrounding warriors slammed their fists against their chest plates. A thunderous salute to the first human ever welcomed into the hierarchy. Jackson straightened his spine. He used to be a janitor, cleaning up the universe's mess. Now, he was something else entirely. He looked at Lyra, and the electric pull between them promised 1,000 more adventures. "So," he whispered, "what do we break next?" Lyra grinned, showing all her teeth. "Everything.